Speaking of fathers, it is Holy Week, and I've been talking about this all week. And today is Maundy Thursday, and people say Maundy. Maundy is from a Latin word meaning commandment. This is the day we celebrate the Last Supper, or remember the Last Supper when Jesus gave the commandment. This is a new commandment, which is that we love one another as He had loved us. My father died on Maundy Thursday about 14 years ago, I think it is, which was just like now. It came together with Passover, so it was a kind of a meaningful thing for me. When I realized that I was going to become a Christian, I thought the one problem this is going to create, the worst problem it's going to create, is going to bring my father and I to absolute blows. I mean, my father and I never really got along, but we had made a separate peace. He loved the grandkids. He was a great granddad. He was a good person. He just wasn't a good father for me. I don't think I'm not sure whether he was a good father for my brothers. They would have to say that. But for me, we didn't get along, and we'd always had a really hard time. But we'd made a separate peace. But this, I knew, was going to end that peace, because when I was a kid, I've told the story many times, but he walked in on me reading the Bible, and he got so upset. I was reading the Gospels, and he got so upset. I was reading them for literary purposes. I had absolutely no faith whatsoever. I didn't think it was a true story. I was just going through it because I realized how important it was to Western literature, and I wanted to be a writer. I was about 15, I guess, 14, 15, and he walked in on me, and which always cracks me up, because he could have walked in on me not just reading porn, he could have walked in on me living porn at that point. And he was furious, and he said to me, "If you ever convert, I will disown you." And I was obviously at that age, I was making a living. I wasn't worried he was going to disown me. But I did realize it was going to just bring us to any end to any separate peace we had. But I realized I had to tell him, because I knew that I'm a public person. I knew I would give an interview at some point or write an article about it, and he'd read it in the paper, and I couldn't have that happen. Even though we didn't talk much about personal things, I still didn't want him finding out about it in the paper. So I thought, well, he's going to come out and visit, and maybe I'll tell him then. I was juggling with it. I hadn't been baptized yet. And he came out at Christmas time with my mother to visit, came out from New York, and he came over, and he was having a problem seeing double. And he went back home. They went home, back to New York. And I kind of laughed about it, because my father was always cutting trips short, either for health reasons or for some made-up emergency. It was just a neurotic habit he had, so I just figured it was a neurotic habit. It wasn't. He had a brain tumor, and he was going to die. And so I realized that I couldn't tell him. I couldn't tell him this major revolution in my life, because it just would have broken his heart and done nothing for him in the last 6 months of his life. So I ended up going back this kind of split-screen life. The priest who was going to prepare me, the Episcopal priest who was going to prepare me for baptism, also lived in New York. And I would fly back to see my father, who was slowly failing, and then I would go from his apartment downtown to see the priest and talk about preparing for baptism. And finally, if you want to read more about this, it's in my book, The Great Good Thing, which is my memoir about my conversion. But finally, I went back, and I was actually literally sitting down. I was lowering my backside into the chair to have a drink of wine with the priest. We were in a restaurant right outside Bryant Park, which is the park near the library in Midtown Manhattan. And my brother called me and told me my father had gone into the hospital, and I knew at that point that it was the end. And I went to the hospital many times. I was supposed to leave the next day, but of course I delayed my flight, and it was Holy Week. And I remember once running through the rain, because I got a call, this was the end and I better get there. And I ran through the rain, and I got up to Grand Central Station, and it was 6 o'clock, so it was rush hour. And there was a line for cabs stretching all the way down 42nd Street. And I went up to the front guy in the line, and I said, I want to take your cab. My father's dying. And the guy looked at me with this look that summed up New York. Like, yeah, oh, yeah, oh, right. And then he gave me the cab and let me go. It was classic New York. He didn't trust me, but he decided the better part of valor was to let me go. And so his family was gathered around him. My father's family was gathered around him, and he died on Maundy Thursday. And I waited around a while to help my brothers deal with the aftermath. And then I flew back just for Easter, just in time for Easter. And I remember, I have this vivid memory of sitting in this church that I had been attending in preparation for baptism, and I was sitting there, and everything seemed to be bathed in golden light. And part of that was the sun coming in through the fantastic stained glass windows that they had, and part of it was just this kind of aura of grief and exhaustion that was surrounding me. And of course, realizing that an amazing transition was taking place in my life. I had lost a father who I had never gotten along with, and found a father who was giving me so much joy and so much insight into the world. And so I have to tell you, I can testify. So it was a sad story, but at the same time, it was a very joyous transition for me, not my father's death, but my conversion. And I can testify that, that this idea that we can't be bound together by ideals and ideas and stories is a false idea. This idea that we have to be at daggers drawn with one another. We are bound together by the stories that we believe in, and what really, really matters is whether or not those stories are true. You can bind a country together in their hatred of the Jews, the way Hitler bound Germany together, but the Jews don't deserve your hatred, and hatred, of course, is a poison that ultimately poisons the person who is feeling it himself. But if you bind people together on the idea that they have rights and that they're free, that story happens to be the true story. You do have rights. Those rights are given to you by God, and you are made to be free. And if you bind people together on the idea of a God who loves them, who died for them, who forgives them, that too is free. And when you have that story, when you know a story, the way you know a story is true, the way you know that the story that you're living, the narrative you're living is true, is over time, your joy increases. And it only increases the more you understand the story, the more your joy increases. That is not true when your story is false. Because when your story is false, what you have to do is keep finding more and more victims to blame for the fact that your story is false. That is how you tell. That is the proof test of the truth of a story. If you have to keep finding other people to blame for your misery, you know that story is false, because you'll never run out of people to blame. And that is why our old friend Uncle Jesus said, judge not, lest ye be judged, right? Because if you are looking at the other guy, that means you don't have the joy from that story. The story is not filling you up with the truth and with joy. I am living evidence, living proof that these are the things that bind us together, not blood, not anything else, not history, nothing else. It is these things that bind us most together. I got to say goodbye. We have a show tomorrow, so the Klavanless weekend is not here yet. You are saved. Curfew shall not ring tonight. I'm Andrew Klavan. This is The Andrew Klavan Show. We will see you tomorrow. The Andrew Klavan Show is produced by Robert Sterling. Executive producer, Jeremy Boring. Senior producer, Jonathan Hay. Our supervising producer is Mathis Glover. Technical producer, Austin Stevens. Edited by Alex Zingaro. Audio is mixed by Mike Cormina. Hair and makeup is by Jesua Alvera. And our animations are by Cynthia Angulo and Jacob Jackson. The Andrew Klavan Show is a Daily Wire Forward Publishing production. Copyright Forward Publishing 2018.